World Chess Championship game number 11. This is an exciting one. Gukesh has white, and he starts with knight f3, like we saw in game number 7 of the match. This is called the ready opening. And in that game, he had a pretty big advantage. It was essentially winning, but he wasn't able to convert. d5, the same move we saw in game 7. And now we see a deviation from Gukesh already on move number 2. He plays pawn to c4, called the ready gambit. I've played this quite a bit myself, and I really like the positions for white. Attacking the pawn on d5. Now this is sort of the correct approach for black. It's grabbing the extra space. The engine says these positions are equal, and black tends to score a little bit better than white when they play d4 and kind of know the lines in this position. Pawn to b4, c5, e3, and we reach an opening called the reverse Blumenfeld gambit. So the idea is Gukesh wants to put a lot of pressure on this black center. And if Ding captures these pawns, it's going to turn out well for white in terms of space. For example, d takes e3, f takes e3, c takes b4, pawn to d4. Look at this big center for Gukesh, and all Ding has in return is one extra pawn. And we know that Gukesh D loves space, so this is not something that Ding wanted to go for. So very interesting opening choice by Gukesh. He sort of knows the dynamic of this match and how Ding doesn't want to give Gukesh the initiative. This is an opening where Gukesh is not playing the most critical lines for white, but he's playing for the initiative and he's offering to gambit a pawn. I love this choice. So knight f6 played in the game. And interestingly, this move took Ding 38 minutes, but it's the main move in the position. And Ding's even played it himself in 2021 in a game against Adiban online. Pawn to a3. Now here's the first novelty by Gukesh, and I like this move. He's saying, okay, I'm going to guard the b pawn with the a pawn, and now I'm ready to capture on d4. You capture back. I'm going to play bishop b2, pressure the center, and I'm going to play for the initiative that way. So it's a kind of solid waiting move that secures the pawn on b4. So now we see a 22-minute think by Ding Liren, and the time advantage is going to factor in to the result of this game. Because now we have a position where it's 1 hour and 59 minutes for Gukesh and 57 minutes for Ding. So Gukesh is up an hour on the clock and we're only 5 moves in. E takes d4, c takes d4, pawn to h3, forces the hand of this bishop, and the best move for the bishop is to capture on f3. That's because this knight guards e5 and pressures d4. So Ding takes, queen takes f3, poking at this pawn, queen c7, d3, locking up the center. Ding does still have the nice advanced pawn on d4, but it's also a pawn that he has to keep an eye on to defend. Position's about equal here according to the computer, but we have a lot of interesting ideas for both sides in this position. a5, threatening this pawn. And here Gukesh plays b5. This is the first move by Gukesh that I'm not in love with. The reason I'm not in love with this move, even though it's kind of thematic in this position, is the knight on b8 heads to d7 and then heads to c5. Where it attacks the pawn on d3. I just don't like giving the knight such a strong outpost, but the other options don't seem that great for white either. So it might have been close to forced. There's no easy way to just take back. Bishop to b2, that's sort of the thematic move. The computer hates it though. After a takes b, if a takes b, the problem is rook takes, bishop takes, e5. And according to the computer, this is like a minus 2.3 advantage for black. This pressure here, the bishop on a1 just running into this pawn chain, the knight still back on b1, this bishop running into this pawn. Just nothing here is going well for white. And it's actually close to winning for black already, which is pretty crazy. So nice idea by Ding playing a5 because there's no bishop to b2. That's the move Gukesh should want to play if he's able to play it. Okay, back to the game. b5. Knight b to d7, coming to the square, g3, and this was the first long think by Gukesh. It was a 60-minute think. So now they're down to about 1 hour each, and I'm shocked that he spent 60 minutes. I think he's probably out of his preparation at this point, and he was maybe considering pawn to g4. But the reason this move is not one that I would expect 60 minutes to be taken on is because this bishop only has 2 options to get out. And to me, g2 just seems like the obvious option. I don't think this bishop ever really wants to sit on e2. He wants to be on g2 where it has this nice long diagonal. So he was probably just looking at g3 or g4. Knight c5 played, bishop g2, knight f to d7, and Ding's looking for knight e5, hitting this pawn twice and hitting the queen. Gukesh says, I can defend that tactically, no problem. Knight e5, queen f4, and here knight takes d3. It's not a big threat because there's queen takes d4, and even stronger, according to the computer, is queen e4, just kind of keeping pressure. Looking here, both knights are attacked, this pawn is still attacked, and importantly, that king is still on e8, bishop's on f8, and these pawns haven't even moved. So black is 1, 2, 3 moves from castling with a half-open e-file and bishops that are opening up for Gukesh. So that's why Ding didn't go for that pawn. Instead, he plays rook to d8, defending. And now we see rook to d1 by Gukesh, which is a mistake. The top move here, and this is a Gukesh-type move, was actually knight coming to d2, allowing the capture on d3, playing queen e4. The knight comes back, but then he has to find this important move, which is not easy to calculate, but Gukesh is known for his calculation skills. Pawn to b6. This is the top line, and there's no knight takes e4 due to b takes c7. The rook is attacked and the knight is attacked at the same time. So Ding would not be able to capture the queen in this position. Instead, he would have to play a move like queen to b8. And after queen e2, this is a slight advantage for white. So this is a position where Ding is up a pawn, but Gukesh has the initiative, and he could push for a win here. But instead he played rook to d1, which is a mistake, but Ding makes a mistake right back on the next move. So it didn't end up hurting Gukesh. The best move for Ding is to play e6 here. And the idea with e6 is we want the bishop coming out to d6, pressuring the queen this way. But instead, g6 was played. And the problem with g6 is this bishop doesn't do a good job attacking the queen, and it really doesn't want to land on g7 because it's just hitting this pawn along the diagonal. That's not super exciting to just defend the pawn. The bishop's a lot more active if it could go to d6. a4 played, pawn to h5, and now bishop to h6 is the idea. So that's what Ding wants to do, play active with the bishop coming out to h6. Still not quite as strong as going to d6. Pawn to b6, trying to deflect this queen away from the defense of the knight, because the white queen defends or attacks it. Queen to d6, bishop to a3, and look at how Gukesh is playing for the initiative. This knight is pinned, this knight's attacked, this pawn's attacked, right? You can just feel Gukesh has the initiative. And this has been the battle early on in the match. Who has the initiative? That proved the winner in game number 1 when Ding had the initiative, and in game number 3 when Gukesh had the initiative. Right now, the initiative is in the favor of Gukesh. He is pushing for the win there, even though the computer is saying this is close to equal. Bishop h6. And after bishop to h6, Gukesh decides, I'm going to take on c5 first, hitting the queen. So there is no bishop takes queen here because bishop takes d6, and that bishop will be captured in the end. White will be up a piece. We take c5, queen e4, threatening queen takes b7. Notice how the king is still in the center and we're on move 20. Knight to c6 to block that diagonal. Knight a3, and this knight wants to head into b5, trying to pose problems. It could also come back to c2. I think that's what happened in the game to put extra pressure here. Rook d7, knight back to c2, and interestingly here, the computer likes rook d to b1, coming into b5, and it holds this pawn. But Gukesh decides to sacrifice the b pawn. A very interesting choice because the top move for black is to take, and it's really the only move that keeps it close to equal. So he's sort of forcing Ding to take the pawn. And if we look at the clocks here, we're at move 22, 18 moves until the bonus time. We have 19 minutes for Gukesh and only 14 minutes for Ding. So he has to make 18 moves in 14 minutes with no increment. This is going to be a huge factor for both players. Rook a to b1 hitting the queen and the pawn. Queen drops back. Rook to b5, and the other rook is ready to come over soon. This rook is now active on b5 along the 5th rank. Now finally we see castling by Ding. Move number 24. And now this move I think is really fun by Gukesh. He puts his knight back in the corner. You almost never see a knight go to one of the corner squares. But the idea is the knight wants to come out to b3 and then to c5. So this knight has been moving all over the place this game, but that's the plan. Rook to b8, knight to b3. Here comes the knight. And if we look at the clock now, Gukesh has 14 minutes, Ding has 7 minutes. And here Ding makes a mistake. He plays pawn to e6. The idea is if knight c5, he moves the rook. And I think the problem for Ding in this position is he was afraid to give back material. He really wanted to hold on to his extra pawn, and that ended up being his downfall. What he should play here is rook to d6, and after knight c5, play knight a7, hitting the rook, and saying, okay, you can take this pawn, right? There's how many white pieces attacking it now? Rook, knight, queen, bishop, they all attack b7. Just give that pawn up. After rook takes, knight takes, move your rook. This position, according to the computer, is still even. It's an equal position. Now, I don't know why Ding was so set on holding onto the pawn. I don't believe he thought he was better here. He must have thought that in that position, let's go back. He must have thought that white was better with the pass pawn. And he might be right. It's probably an easier position to play for white. But this is the line that would have held equality. The computer says equal with best play. But instead he plays e6. He's trying to hold this b pawn. Knight c5, the rook moves. This knight is why the pawn is being held, because it's blocking the queen and bishop along the diagonal. But as we know, if you do puzzle rush or any sort of tactics, there are a lot of tactics in the air right now. Look at the pressure on b7. The pawn guards the knight, which is attacked twice and only defended twice. There's a pin along the b file. If this pawn moves, this rook gets lost. Knight takes b7 is a removing the defender type threat, defender of this knight. So there's all of these tactics in the air. Now the only move to keep the game close is knight to b4, which allows white to win the pawn, and then black just plays on from here. Just slightly worse position. Instead, Ding spends 27 seconds, plays queen to c8. And if you want to pause the video, try to find the move for white. This is a massive blunder. Gukesh spends 15 seconds, and he plays queen takes c6, queen sacrifice, and Ding immediately resigns. There was so much pressure on Ding this whole game, both on the clock and on the board, that he eventually crumbled. A 29-move victory for Gukesh, a brilliant game. And let me just show you why this works. There's two lines here to look at. If queen takes c6, now there's bishop takes c6, and if pawn takes back, rook takes b8, and Gukesh is up a rook. And if b takes c6, there's rook takes b8, pinning the queen along the 8th rank. Queen takes, rook takes, and Gukesh is up a knight. So the game is completely over. Queen sacrifice to win the game, and now we're in for a very exciting last 3 games of the match, because now Ding Liren, for the first time, is down in the match, and he is forced to play for a win. He has to get 1 win in the next 3 games. So we're going to see some fight out of Ding Liren finally in this match. I'm super excited for it, so make sure to tune into our YouTube channel. I will have recaps of the remaining games of the match. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.